Hey, it's Amanda. My mom kicked me out of the house, just like that. Leave the key, take your stuff, and go. She didn't even blink. But what hurt more than the words? The years of lies, the betrayal that led me straight to a dead end. They sold my house, took what was mine, and I never saw it coming. Hook 2. You won't believe what happened next. I thought I was losing everything, until the bank called me owner of their business. My family thought they'd won. But what they didn't know, the truth was far worse than any lie they ever told me. Now I'm about to take everything back. But at what cost? The air in the dining room was thick, an invisible weight pressing down on all of us. The quiet clinking of cutlery against plates seemed louder than it should have been, each sound echoing in the silence. I sat there, trying to force a smile, trying to ignore the tension that seemed to wrap itself around my chest. The family dinner, once a moment of joy, now felt like an obligation. Dad, as usual, barely spoke a word, his cold eyes scanning the room with indifference. I tried to focus on the food, but my mind was racing. The old, familiar discomfort gnawed at me. It had always been this way, never good enough, always overlooked. But tonight, something felt different. The weight of my father's silence seemed heavier, more deliberate. I looked at my mother, her face passive, as if she had long ago given up on anything resembling affection. My sister, across the table, didn't even glance in my direction. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. It was as if the very air in that room had changed. Suddenly, my father's voice broke through the quiet. His words sliced through the air like a knife. Leave the key, take your stuff, and go. For a moment, everything stopped. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. His voice wasn't raised, but the coldness of his command hit me harder than any shout ever could. The room felt smaller, suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to process what he had just said. Leave the key. Take my stuff and go. Was this really happening? I looked at my mother, desperate for some sign of support, but she just stared at me, her eyes void of emotion, like she had never cared. The betrayal I felt from both of them hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had spent my life trying to prove my worth, trying to earn their love, but it was all for nothing. I didn't even realize my sister had gotten up until she stood next to me, a suitcase in hand. She didn't say a word. Just handed it to me. The cold, silent gesture was enough to shatter the last piece of hope I had left. In that moment, I wasn't just being told to leave, I was being erased from their lives completely. My mind raced as I stood up, my legs shaking, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the words stuck in my throat. What was there to say? What could I say to people who had never truly cared for me? My body felt heavy as I walked toward the door, the suitcase clutched in my hand. I didn't look back as I stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind me, but it felt like the entire house had slammed its doors on me long ago. I stood there on the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what to do next. How had it come to this? How had I let them do this to me? Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. I pulled it out, my hands trembling, and answered without looking at the number. Hello? I asked, my voice cracking. The voice on the other end was formal, almost cold. We're calling to inform you that you are now the owner of your family's business. I blinked, unsure if I had heard correctly. My mind couldn't quite process the words, the family business. The one my father had worked his whole life for? Now it was mine. The shock hit me like a wave, crashing over me, pushing me back with an overwhelming force. What was I supposed to do with this? After everything that had just happened, after they had tossed me out like yesterday's trash, how could I possibly care about something that had never mattered to them? The anger that had been bubbling up inside me started to shift, taking on a new form. I didn't know what to make of this revelation, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. Standing on the driveway, the suitcase still heavy in my hand, I tried to gather my thoughts. The shock of being rejected by my family, of being cast aside so easily, was still raw. But now, I was holding something they could never take away. I was holding the key to something bigger, something that could change everything. But was I ready for it? I didn't know. I didn't even know where to start. All I could do was walk away from the house that had been my home for so long, the weight of the suitcase a reminder that nothing would ever be the same again. The anger swirled inside me, mixing with a deep sense of betrayal and loss. But there was something else too, something I couldn't deny, a feeling of power, of control. I looked back at the house one last time, a place I would never return to as the same person. I wasn't sure what was waiting for me in the future, but I knew that whatever it would be mine to decide. This was the start of something new. But no matter how far I walked, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The first few days in my new apartment felt like walking through a fog. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter, but the reality of it all hit me harder than I expected. I sat on the couch in the sparsely furnished living room, the silence heavy around me. The apartment was mine now, but it felt empty. There was no warmth here, no comfort, nothing but the echo of my own thoughts. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I tried to focus, to shake the sense of disbelief that clung to me like a second skin. But the truth was hard to ignore. I had been cast out. My own family, the people who were supposed to love and support me, had pushed me aside without a second thought. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The dinner, the suitcase, my father's cold words. How had I gone from being a daughter to an outsider in the blink of an eye? I thought about my childhood, the subtle signs of my exclusion, the moments I'd brushed aside, trying to convince myself that things weren't as bad as they seemed. Now, with everything stripped away, I saw it all clearly. I had been invisible to them. I had never been enough. I stood by the window, looking out at the city, lost in thought. The life I had known was gone, and I wasn't sure what came next. What was I supposed to do with this new reality? What was I supposed to feel? Anger? Grief? Both. Maybe none of it. I didn't know anymore. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and dialed the number for the family business. My hands were shaking, but I held the phone to my ear, willing myself to sound composed. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist on the other end sounded as professional as ever, unaffected by the bombshell she was about to drop. "Good afternoon, miss. I'm calling to inform you that you are now the owner of your family's business." I sat there for a moment, the words sinking in slowly. The business, the one my father had built from the ground up, now it was mine. But was it really? I had spent my entire life in the shadow of that business, always playing the role of the dutiful daughter, never the one who mattered, and now it was mine. But why? Why had this been given to me after everything? I had never been a part of the decision-making process before, always sidelined while my father made all the calls. And now, suddenly, the whole thing was in my hands. But I wasn't sure I was prepared for this. After a long pause, I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'll be there to meet with the management team," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. I needed to understand what this meant, what I was supposed to do with something that had been thrust upon me in such a cold and calculated way. The call ended, and I sat there for a while, staring at the phone. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt nothing. There was a weight to the title, but no sense of accomplishment. The anger that had been brewing inside me started to bubble to the surface, but there was something else there too. A sense of responsibility. I stood up, pacing the apartment. What had just happened? My whole life had been torn apart, but now I had a chance to rebuild, a chance to make something of myself. But how? Later that day, I found myself standing in front of the glass doors of the company's headquarters, the weight of the moment sinking in. The building loomed over me, its cold, sterile exterior a stark contrast to the chaos I felt inside. I took a deep breath and walked through the doors. The receptionist gave me a nod, and I made my way to the conference room. The team was already there, waiting for me. They were skeptical. I could feel it in the air. Most of them had known me as the daughter of the founder, but none of them saw me as a leader. I wasn't sure I saw myself as one either, but I knew I couldn't show any weakness. Not now, not after everything. I took my seat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the edge. I could feel their eyes on me, assessing me, waiting for me to crack. But I wouldn't, not this time. "Let's get to work," I said, my voice firm, more confident than I felt. The silence in the room stretched for a moment, and I could tell they were waiting for me to falter, to back down, but I didn't. I couldn't. The meeting continued, and though the tension was palpable, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just playing a role anymore. I was in charge. Whether they accepted it or not, this was my time. After the meeting, I walked out of the conference room, my head held high. The staff might not have accepted me yet, but I knew I had to prove myself. Not to them, to me. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't shake the memories of my childhood, the moments when I felt invisible, when I was pushed aside for my siblings, the times when my father's approval seemed so far out of reach, when I was made to feel like I was never enough. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn their love, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. But as I sat in my car, the weight of those memories heavy on my chest, something shifted. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had spent too much time looking for something that wasn't coming. Now I had to focus on me, on my future. I parked in front of my apartment, sitting there for a moment, taking in the quiet. The world outside seemed to be moving, but in that moment, I was still. A calmness settled over me as I realized that this was my chance to prove who I really was. I didn't know what was ahead. I didn't know where this path would lead. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going to walk it alone. And for the first time in my life, that didn't scare me. As I stepped out of the car, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see. Someone from my past, a former childhood friend, someone who knew me before all of this, before the family's power dynamics took over. "I didn't expect to see you here," they said, a hint of surprise in their voice. "After everything that happened, I thought we were done." I didn't know how to respond. My heart raced in my chest, a flood of emotions rushing over me. This person was a part of my past, but they also carried memories I had long pushed aside. I didn't know whether to welcome them back or push them away. The uncertainty of what came next gripped me, but I knew this encounter was something I couldn't ignore. The next few days felt like a blur. The weight of the business I'd inherited hung heavily over me. I wasn't prepared for this. I barely knew the ins and outs of the company, let alone how to handle the chaos that came with it. And yet, here I was, thrust into this role, with no one to guide me, no one to offer comfort. I had to figure it out. I had to stand tall, even though I was trembling on the inside. The first real challenge came quicker than I had expected. A contract, buried deep in the company's archives, had been overlooked by my father. The terms were bad, and the deal had the potential to cost the business a small fortune. I stared at the papers on my desk, the fine print blurring as my mind raced. I had never made decisions like this before. I had always been the one in the background, listening to my father's commands, watching him handle the tough decisions. But now, it was my turn. I could feel the pressure building inside me. My chest tightened, my hands clammy as I picked up the phone to call the legal team. I had to fix this. I had no choice. But how? What if I made the wrong move? What if I made things worse? As the phone rang, I remembered a conversation I had once overheard between my father and one of his colleagues. He had always known how to handle these things, how to make the right call in a crisis. But now, all that knowledge was lost to me. I was alone in this. "Hello, Amanda?" The voice on the other end snapped me back to the present. I cleared my throat. "Yes, I need to talk about this contract. We've got a serious problem." The conversation was a blur of legal jargon, but one thing stuck with me. I was the one responsible now. There was no turning back. No one else was going to fix this. As I hung up the phone, I sat back in my chair, my head spinning. The pressure felt suffocating, but a small spark of determination flickered inside me. I wasn't going to let this ruin me. I had to push forward. I had to prove that I could do this. But as I prepared to face the next step, my thoughts drifted back to my family. The betrayal still stung, sharp and fresh. How had they not seen me? How had they treated me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter? It wasn't just the business they had taken from me. It was my place in their lives. I had always been the backup, the one who was never quite good enough. I remembered the way my father had always dominated the business, how my siblings had been the ones to get the praise while I was left behind, expected to simply support. I wasn't supposed to be the one making the decisions. I was supposed to stay in the background, be a good daughter, keep my head down, and never question anything. But now I had to question everything. The responsibility I carried was crushing. I could feel it in every bone, in every fiber of my being. The legacy of my father, the weight of his name, it was all on my shoulders now. And despite the anger, the betrayal, the hurt, I knew I couldn't just walk away. This was my chance to prove to myself that I was more than just the daughter who never measured up. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me to this point. The moments of rejection, the times I had tried to be seen, to be heard, only to be dismissed. It was all clearer now. My whole life had been spent trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. But I wasn't going to let that stop me anymore. I called my mother the next morning, her voice cool and distant on the other end. "Amanda, we need to talk about the business," I said, my voice firm. There was a long pause before she spoke, her words measured. "You know how we've always done things. You should follow the same methods your father used. Stick to the plan." I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken judgment in her tone. She had always seen me as a failure, never as capable as my siblings, always the one who fell short. "You don't get it, Mom," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I'm not going to keep doing things the same way. I need to make my own decisions now. I have to find my own path." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. "You'll regret this," she finally said. "This business is a family legacy. You're throwing it away." I felt a rush of anger, but I held it in check. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking control of my life, Mom. I'm not asking for your approval anymore." I ended the call and sat there, letting her words echo in my mind. My mother had always been the voice of tradition, of keeping things as they were, never questioning the past. But I was done with that. I couldn't keep living in her shadow, waiting for her to validate me. I had to do this for myself, not for her or anyone else. The next morning, I walked into the office with a new sense of purpose. I was going to fix the contract issue, make the necessary changes, and show everyone that I was capable of handling the responsibility. The decision was a hard one, but I made it. I called the company's CEO and started the process of negotiating a new deal. It was a bold move, one that could either make or break my leadership, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let my father's mistakes define me. I was in control now. For the first time in my life, I felt the power in my hands, and it felt good. As I was finalizing the deal, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister. "I don't think you fully understand what you've gotten yourself into," the text read. A chill ran down my spine. What did she mean by that? I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sense of unease settling in. I knew there was more to this than just a family business. My family might still be trying to control me from behind the scenes, but I wasn't going to let them. I sat at my desk, staring at the pile of papers in front of me. The day had started just like any other, but my mind was far from calm. The weight of everything I had discovered over the past few days settled deep into my chest, like a stone I couldn't shake. The phone call from my sister, her cryptic words echoing in my mind, lingered in the air, just as heavy as the unfinished business I was now carrying. I needed answers. It wasn't enough to go on the information I had so far. I couldn't let it end like this. I had to know what my family had been hiding, what they had been doing behind my back. Picking up the phone, I dialed my sister's number. It rang several times before she picked up. "Amanda." Her voice was neutral, almost too calm, and I could hear the tension underneath her words. "What's going on?" "I'm calling about the message you sent me," I said, my voice firm, but inside, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. "What do you mean when you said, 'You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into'?" There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, it was as if she were carefully choosing her words. "Amanda, I don't think you should be making waves right now. You don't know what you're dealing with." My suspicion grew. It wasn't like her to be so evasive, especially not over something so serious. My frustration boiled over, and I couldn't help but remember the years of strained conversations, the subtle dismissal of my thoughts and feelings, the quiet way she had always kept me at arm's length. Stop acting like I'm some naive kid who doesn't know what's happening. I'm not asking for permission anymore, Lisa. I need to know what's going on. Her voice lowered, and she sighed deeply. You don't know the whole story, Amanda. It's not as simple as you think. Just be careful. She ended the call abruptly, and I sat there, the phone still in my hand, heart racing. The doubt gnawed at me. There was something bigger here, something they weren't telling me. But what? I hung up and made the decision right then. I needed more than just a phone call. I had to confront the truth head on. The answers weren't going to come from them, not unless I dug deeper. I made my way to the one place I hadn't yet ventured, my childhood home. It was empty now, the familiar walls echoing with the ghosts of the past, but the weight of the memories was still heavy. I knew where to look. The drawer in my father's office, the one he never let me open as a child, the one filled with his secrets. My heart pounded as I rummaged through the cluttered desk. The sound of paper shifting in the drawer filled the silence, and then I found it, a letter, tucked behind a stack of old contracts. I pulled it out, unfolded it carefully, and began reading. The letter was addressed to my mother, and it was dated a few years before my father passed away. In it, he outlined his plans for the family business, his expectations for my siblings, and, surprisingly, his thoughts about me. Amanda, it read, is a good daughter, but I have little hope she will ever be capable of running the business. Her mind is too soft, and she lacks the drive necessary to succeed. I am counting on the other two to carry the legacy forward. I could barely breathe as I read the words. My father, the man who had always told me I would one day be the one to take over, had never truly believed in me. All these years, I had been fighting for approval that he had already decided I would never earn. I shoved the letter back into the drawer, my hands shaking. I felt the sting of betrayal so sharply, it was like a physical blow. How could he have done this? How could he have treated me like this, after everything? I stood in the room for a moment, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, disbelief, each one crashing into the next. I couldn't stay here anymore. I had to do something. I had to take control. I knew where to go next. My father's lawyer, he had always been the one who handled the business's legal matters. I needed to meet with him to figure out how I could protect what was left of the business and finally take my place in it, despite everything. The meeting was set for the following morning. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just discovered. Was there more? Was my family's betrayal even deeper than I thought? The next day, I walked into the lawyer's office, a mixture of determination and dread tightening my chest. As I sat across from him, he looked at me with a kind but weary gaze. Amanda, he said gently, I've been waiting for you to come in. There's much to discuss. He didn't waste time. He handed me the documents, and as I read through them, my heart sank. There were provisions in my father's will that I had never been told about. My siblings were set to receive more, a lot more, than I had ever known. This wasn't just about a business anymore. This was about everything they had kept from me. And now, the truth was right in front of me. The lawyer's advice was simple. Act fast. There are legal steps you can take to protect your position, but you need to act before they do. I nodded, barely hearing him. I was too busy processing the magnitude of everything that had happened. My family had built their lives on lies, and now I had to tear those lies down. As I left the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Amanda, this behavior is unacceptable. You need to come back to the family and stop all of this nonsense. I clenched my jaw. This was it, the final straw. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wasn't going back. The anger inside me grew, but I forced it down. It wasn't about anger anymore. And it was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I called a family meeting for the next day. It was time to lay everything on the table, to make my move, but as I began to prepare my speech, the power went out. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness, and I heard the familiar buzz of my phone. It was a message, simple but chilling. You're too late. They already know. My heart skipped a beat. I stood frozen, trying to comprehend what this meant. Had my family known I was going to confront them? Were they already planning something against me? The boardroom was a sterile, cold space, the kind of place I had spent years in but never truly felt I belonged. Today, however, it was different. Today, I was in charge. The weight of that fact settled on me like an anchor, but I didn't let it show. I had to walk in there and take control. I sat at the head of the table, the silence stretching long before anyone spoke. I could feel their eyes on me, skeptical and unsure. It didn't matter. I wasn't here to ask for permission. I was here to claim what was mine. I cleared my throat, setting my papers down in front of me. I've come here today to make it clear, I started, my voice steady, but carrying the edge of authority I'd never been allowed to show before. I'm taking control of this company. It's no longer up for discussion. The murmurs around the table were almost deafening, each person unsure how to respond. My father's shadow hung over us all, but I would no longer let it control my life. This was my time to finally stand up for myself. Flashbacks of my life with this company flashed before my eyes, the times I had been relegated to the sidelines, watching my father and siblings take the spotlight. Every time I tried to assert myself, it was dismissed, laughed off. But no more. This company was as much mine as it was anyone else's, and it was time for me to show them that I could feel the weight of my family's judgment in their silence. But I wasn't backing down. Not today. After the meeting, I needed to talk to the one person who might give me the guidance I needed, a lawyer. I'd been putting off this conversation, but there was no more room for hesitation. I had to understand the legal ins and outs of the business, what I had, what I didn't, and how I could move forward. Sitting across from the lawyer, I barely heard his opening words. My mind was already running through 1,000 scenarios. What had I missed? What could I still claim? He didn't waste time, getting straight to the point. Amanda, there are some things you need to know. You're in a position to challenge your siblings, legally speaking. The words hit me like a cold slap. It was my chance. My siblings, those I thought were on my side, might not be as secure as they believed. I was finally going to take control. The weight of the business, of my future, was in my hands, and I was ready. But that realization came with a deep conflict. What would this cost me? My family? Would I lose them forever if I pushed forward? I wasn't sure, but I knew that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their expectations. The stakes had changed. By the time I left the lawyer's office, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was mine. It was the first step in reclaiming what was taken from me. I wasn't prepared for what came next, though. That evening, I decided to confront my family directly. I called a family meeting, asking everyone to come together in the conference room of the business. As I waited, I could feel my pulse quicken. This was it, the moment I had been dreading and craving at the same time. When they arrived, the tension was immediate. My siblings looked at me with disbelief, but it was my mother's face that hit me hardest. She stood with that same expression, the one I had seen so many times before, full of expectation and judgment. But this time, it was different. I wasn't the daughter hoping to please. I was the woman who had finally found her voice. I'm taking control of this business, I said, my words ringing in the room. I'm not asking for permission anymore. This is my legacy too, and I will make the decisions moving forward. The room fell silent, the weight of my declaration sinking in. My siblings didn't know how to react. My mother's eyes narrowed, the disappointment etched into her features. How dare you, my sister snapped. You think you can just waltz in here and take everything we've worked for? You're not taking anything, I shot back, feeling the adrenaline surging through me. It was never yours to begin with. This is about what I've earned, what was always supposed to be mine. I turned to face my mother. You've spent my entire life undermining me, trying to make me feel small. But that stops now. I'm not your puppet. I'm not anyone's backup plan. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother stood frozen, as if the words I had just spoken were too much for her to process. Don't do this, Amanda, she said finally, her voice cold and cutting. You're making a huge mistake. I didn't care anymore. The years of silently enduring her disapproval, the years of her putting my father's wishes above mine, it was all in the past. I wasn't here to please her or anyone else. I'm not doing this for you, I said, my voice firm. I'm doing this for me. As I left the meeting, my heart pounded in my chest. I had finally made my stand, but I knew that the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Then came the unexpected. Later that night, as I was going over the details of my plan, I received a call. A business partner of my father's, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, had reached out. I was skeptical, but I needed all the help I could get. When I met him, he didn't waste any time. I know things about your father's business, he said, his voice low. Things you've never been told. Things that could give you the leverage you need. I was hesitant. This man had always been a shadow in the background of our family's dealings. I didn't trust him, but in that moment, I realized he might be my only chance at real control. You're taking a huge risk, he warned me. But it's a risk worth taking. I nodded. I wasn't afraid of the fight anymore. I had already lost everything I thought I had. There was nothing left to lose. But just as I began to strategize my next steps, I received a letter, a single page, typed and unsigned. It was brief, but it hit hard. Stay out of things, the letter warned, or face severe consequences. My heart skipped a beat. My family wasn't just angry with me, they were fighting back. And I knew they wouldn't stop until I was out of the picture for good. The call from my lawyer was everything I had feared and more. My family was making their move, fast and decisively. I had expected some pushback, but this felt different. They were working behind the scenes, gathering their allies, and now they were trying to block me legally. The weight of the situation crashed over me like a wave. I had fought so hard to take control, and now I was being dragged back into the same power struggle I thought I had escaped. My anger flared up, but I couldn't let it consume me. This was it, the point of no return. I was already in too deep, and now it was time to face the consequences of my decisions. There was no turning back. My family was trying to strip me of everything I had worked for, and they were willing to use every trick in the book to get their way. I slammed my hand on the desk, the sound reverberating through the room, shaking off the tension. My lawyer's voice brought me back to the present. Amanda, you need to act now. You can't let them get ahead of you. His words were like a jolt to my system. I had already let my family control too much of my life. I wouldn't let them win this time. I made up my mind in that moment. I wasn't going to back down. The next steps were clear, but they wouldn't be easy. I had to move fast, set up meetings, gather the necessary documents, and ensure that I had everything in place before they could make their next move. There was a fire burning inside me now, and I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. Later that day, I sat down to prepare for the family meeting I had called. I knew it wouldn't be pretty. My siblings would be angry, and my mother, she would try to manipulate the situation, just like she always did. But I was done being the obedient daughter. I was done being silenced. This was my fight, and I was ready to face them all. As I walked into the meeting room, the air was thick with tension. My siblings sat around the table, their expressions a mix of disbelief and hostility. My mother, of course, looked at me like I had betrayed them all, but I wasn't the one who had betrayed anyone. They had done that long before I even realized it. I stood in front of them, feeling the weight of the moment. I'm taking control, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. This business is mine now. I'm not asking for permission. I'm doing this for myself, for my future, and for what I've earned. The room erupted in disbelief. My sister, the one who had always played the obedient role, glared at me. You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours? She sneered. Yours? I shot back, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. It was never yours to begin with. It was always mine, but you and Mom were too busy running things behind my back to ever see that. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. No more. I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not here to please you or anyone else. I've spent my whole life trying to meet your expectations, but you never saw me. Well, now you will. It was a moment of truth, and I knew this wouldn't be easy. My family was no longer my safety net. They were the enemy, and the sooner I accepted that, the better. But I wasn't afraid anymore. After the meeting, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I had taken a stand, but now I had to prepare for the fallout. My family would not go down without a fight, and I knew that the real battle had just begun. It wasn't long before the next wave hit. As I sat at my desk, trying to organize my next move, I received a message. A news outlet had somehow gotten hold of a family secret, one my father had kept hidden for years. It was a dark secret about the business dealings that no one ever spoke of, and now the press had it. I froze for a moment, my mind racing. The secret was a bombshell, and it had the potential to destroy everything. It was something my father had buried, something that I had never been told. But now, it was out in the open, and the damage was done. The press was already sniffing around for more details, and I was left to deal with the fallout. I called my lawyer immediately, my hands trembling as I explained what had happened. He was calm, but I could hear the tension in his voice. "Amanda, we need to contain this. It could ruin everything you've worked for." I felt my world closing in. I had just gained control, and now this. The weight of the business, of everything I had just taken on, was crushing me. But I couldn't let this break me. I couldn't let them win. "We'll handle it," I told my lawyer, my voice steely. "But this changes everything. I'll take care of it." But as I began to formulate my plan, a text message flashed on my phone. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "You've underestimated the game you're playing," it read. My heart skipped a beat. What did this mean? Who was behind this? Who else knew what was going on? The tension in the pit of my stomach grew. Someone was working against me from the shadows, and I had no idea who. But I would find out. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. The room was silent, save for the sound of my breath as I sat at my desk. My eyes scanned the documents in front of me, proof, evidence, and a final strategy that would change everything. This was it. I could feel the weight of the confrontation ahead pressing against my chest, but I didn't back down. I'd come too far to hesitate now. I was preparing for the final stand, the moment where everything I'd fought for would either break or solidify my claim to the business I was born to lead. The pressure was immense, but the more I thought about the years of doubt, the whispers of my inadequacies, the more I realized how much strength had come from all that rejection. It was my time now. A flashback hit me. Those days I spent overlooked, relegated to the background of my family's plans. I was nothing more than a shadow then, but today, I would stand in the light. The woman they never thought would succeed would now be the one holding the reins. I met with my lawyer shortly after. He looked me in the eye as he handed me a final set of papers. "This is it, Amanda. You're ready. You've got what you need." His words should have felt reassuring, but instead, they sharpened the edge of my resolve. As I looked at myself in the mirror before heading into the boardroom, I found the woman I had once been hiding under all the years of family expectations. She was still there, and she was ready. I was ready. The boardroom felt like a battlefield as I stepped inside, the tension palpable. My family sat around the table, their eyes narrow, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger. It was the moment of truth, and they had no idea what was coming. I cleared my throat and began. "I've gathered the facts, the mismanagement, the lies, the betrayal. Today, I'm bringing it all to light, and I'm here to claim what is mine." My heart was pounding, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't just fighting for a business, I was fighting for my right to exist on my own terms, to no longer be someone's backup plan. My voice rang through the room as I presented the evidence, financial statements, emails, and testimonies, all pieces of the puzzle my family had tried so desperately to keep hidden. They squirmed as I laid it out for them. This was no longer about family loyalty or legacy, it was about the truth. A flashback hit me. Me, at 12, sitting in the corner of family gatherings, watching as my siblings basked in the attention, their accomplishments being celebrated. I'd been invisible then, and I was done being invisible now. I wasn't just part of the family business, I was the business. Just as I was about to make my final point, the door slammed open. My father, who had remained quiet until now, walked in, his face hard with anger. Enough, he barked. You're undermining everything we've built. You're tearing the family apart. His voice cut through the tension like a knife, and for a split second, I felt the sting of his words. But I was no longer the little girl who wanted his approval. I was the woman who would no longer tolerate his control. You want to talk about family? I shot back, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. You've never cared about me. This isn't about family, it's about power. You want control, and you want me out. But I'm not leaving anymore. Not this time. The room erupted in chaos. My siblings shouted, accusing me of betrayal. My mother, who had sat silent through most of it, now spoke in a quiet, strained voice. You've gone too far, Amanda. I let the insults roll off me. I wasn't backing down. This was a battle for my future, and I would not lose. But then, just as I thought I had them cornered, I dropped the bombshell. The evidence I had wasn't just financial documents. I had something far more damning, a secretly recorded conversation between my father and one of his business rivals. It detailed their collusion to push me out and take the business for themselves. I watched their faces fall as I played the recording for the room. The shock was visible. No one expected me to have this. My father's betrayal, exposed in real time, was undeniable. I had won. But as the room fell into stunned silence, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. My family sat frozen, unable to speak. The power dynamic had shifted, but it felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. I wasn't sure how long I'd have control, but I knew one thing: there was no turning back. As I left the boardroom, ready to make the next moves, a text message pinged on my phone. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was from. You've underestimated the game you're playing. The message sent a shiver through me. I wasn't alone in this fight. Someone else was playing a much deeper game, and I had just stepped right into it. The clock ticked away as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers scattered before me. Today wasn't just another day. It was the culmination of everything I had fought for. My mind was a storm of emotions, determination, fear, hope, all tangled up. The courtroom battle was just hours away, and I was ready. But there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. I had spent so many years being told I wasn't enough. Every time I stepped up, it was like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to fail. Now, I was going to stand tall. I thought back to the first time I made the decision to take control of my life. It was a late night, sitting alone in my apartment after another argument with my father. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live under his thumb, always second-guessing myself. I had to do it. And now, today, everything would change. After double-checking my strategy with my lawyer, I knew there was no turning back. The weight of my decisions settled on my shoulders like a heavy cloak, but I refused to let it break me. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. I was going to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and nothing would stop me. The courtroom was everything I had imagined: sterile, tense, cold. As I stepped in, I could feel the eyes of my family on me. They sat across from me, their expressions a mixture of disdain and disbelief. My father, the man who had spent my whole life telling me I was never good enough, now sat there, his smug face unreadable. The opposing counsel, hired by my family to crush me, was already preparing his case. But I wasn't afraid. I had something they didn't: truth. As my lawyer began, presenting the evidence that proved my family's betrayal, a cold rage simmered beneath my skin. They thought they could push me around, keep me in the dark, make me feel small. But today, I was taking the reins. The tables were turning, and I was in control now. I caught a flash of my younger self in the back of my mind, the girl who was never heard, who watched from the sidelines as my siblings took center stage. The girl who constantly tried to prove herself, but never could. That girl was gone. Today, I would make sure they all saw who I had become. Just as I was about to make my final argument, the room fell silent. My father stood up, his voice cutting through the tension. "Enough," he snapped. "This is all a lie. You're trying to destroy the family's legacy, your own father's legacy, for your own selfish gain." I felt the sting of his words, but I wasn't going to let him get to me. His accusations were desperate, a last-ditch attempt to hold on to the control he'd had for so long. But I wasn't backing down. This wasn't about legacy. This was about me reclaiming what was mine. The courtroom erupted. My siblings began shouting, trying to drown out the truth, but I stood there, calm, collected. My father's words had always made me question my worth, but today was different. Today, I was going to show him, and everyone else, that I was worth more than they'd ever given me credit for. The chaos continued, but I knew it was time. I had the final piece of the puzzle, something that would prove everything. I pulled out the recording, my father's voice, clear and undeniable, speaking to one of the company's rivals. The conversation detailed their plans to push me out of the company, to betray me, all for their own gain. The room fell into stunned silence as I played the recording. My father's betrayal, exposed. My family's manipulation, laid bare. For the first time, I saw real shock on their faces. Not the smug expressions I was so used to. The power had shifted, and I wasn't backing down. I had won. But then, just when I thought the victory was mine, another twist came. My mother stood up slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of something unreadable. "Amanda," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I'll give you what you want. The control, the business, everything. But there's a price." My heart stopped. I had expected everything from my father, but not this. Not from my mother. She continued, her words slow, deliberate. "You'll take the business, but you'll also take on the responsibility of saving the family from the scandal this will cause. You'll rebuild everything, and you'll do it under the shadow of this betrayal." I stood frozen, my mind racing. I had fought for this. For years, I'd dreamed of taking control, of proving that I was worth something. But at what cost? Was I ready to take on the weight of it all, knowing that the family I was fighting for might never fully accept me? As I stared at my mother, her eyes locked with mine, I knew the final decision was mine to make. Victory had never been this complicated. The sound of my breath was the only thing I could hear as I sat in my living room, the victory from the court still too fresh to fully absorb. The ruling was in my favor, and I had taken control of my family's business, the one thing I had long been denied. But something inside me felt strange. Was this truly the victory I'd always dreamed of? Or was there something more that I still hadn't claimed? The weight of what I had just won settled heavily in my chest. I glanced at the papers on the coffee table, the documents that confirmed my ownership, my stake in the business. My hands were trembling slightly as I picked them up, but it wasn't fear. It was something deeper, a mix of pride and sorrow. I had fought for this, but it wasn't the satisfaction I had expected. I hadn't expected it to feel this empty. Memories of years spent being invisible in my own family flooded my mind. I remembered the moments I was pushed aside, made to feel unimportant while my siblings took center stage. But here I was now, finally seen, finally heard. I had won, but in a way, I wondered if I'd lost something along the way. As I picked up my phone to send a message to my lawyer, a knock at the door broke through my thoughts. I sighed, reluctantly standing up. This was the last thing I wanted to deal with today, but life never asked for permission. When I opened the door, I found my mother and sister standing there, their faces pale, their expressions uncertain. My mother's eyes searched mine, as if trying to gauge if this was the right moment to speak. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was this an apology, or another manipulation? "Can we come in?" my mother asked softly, her voice unsteady. I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me to turn them away, to hold my ground and not let them twist this moment. But something in their eyes made me hesitate, made me wonder if they had truly come to apologize, or if they had something else in mind. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil brewing inside me. They entered, and my mother immediately sat down, her hands wringing in her lap. "Amanda," she began, "we know things haven't been easy, but this isn't the way. Please, reconsider. There's still time to fix this." I could feel my heart racing, my thoughts spinning. Could I trust them? Could I trust her? The mother who had promised to always support me, but had failed me time and time again. I had spent so many years hoping she would come through for me, but now I couldn't ignore the reality. Before I could respond, my sister spoke up. "There's more," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "One last thing we have to tell you. You need to listen." A cold dread washed over me. What now? My mother handed me a letter, and I could immediately feel the weight of it. It was from their lawyer, our family's lawyer. The moment I saw it, I knew something was wrong. The letter threatened to expose deeply personal and painful secrets from my past if I didn't drop my claims to the business. My hands shook as I read the words. They were still trying to control me, using fear as their weapon. A deep anger surged through me. They had already taken so much from me, my childhood, my confidence, and now they were trying to take my victory, my right to live freely. I set the letter down, my fingers clenched tightly around the edge of the coffee table. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why now? Why didn't you care about me before?" My mother and sister remained silent, their faces hardened, unwilling to face the truth of their actions. All the years of manipulation, all the lies, they had led to this. I couldn't let them control me anymore. "Do you really think this is going to work?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You can't control me anymore. I'm done with this." The room went cold. The tension in the air thickened as I realized something. I had never really had a family, not the way I had hoped, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my own life, and today was the last day I would let them tear me down. "I'm not going to back down," I said, my voice steady. "This is my life, and I'm taking it back, once and for all." I stood up and walked toward the door, but not before I turned to look back at them one last time. My heart was heavy, but the weight wasn't a burden. It was liberation. The ties that had held me back for so long were finally being severed. My mother and sister were silent, stunned by my words. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. What I needed was to be free, and I had finally done it. I stepped out the door and walked into the unknown. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I could handle it. The emotional scars from my family's betrayal would never fully heal, but I had reclaimed my life. It was mine to live. As I walked away from the house, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had made it through. But as I approached my car, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my father's lawyer. I stopped in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. I opened the email, and what I read made my stomach turn. The past wasn't done with me yet. The game wasn't over. I stared at the screen, my mind racing, unsure of what to do next. The past was threatening to catch up with me. Was this just the beginning of another battle?